That's all we want, really, isn't it? But it's so hard to do when somebody that we love is hurting. But when we are hurting, that is all we want. We don't want someone to come in and turn the light on. We don't want someone to rescue us. We don't want someone to take the pain away. It'd be nice, but it's not really what we want. We just want company. Like, I've worked with lots of people, thousands at this stage, and I'd say majority of the effectiveness that I have is that I'm not trying to fix them and that I'm not trying to take their pain away. Now, that's not to say that I wouldn't like for their pain to be less or to diminish. That'd be lovely. But I know that the real power in what I do is in just being with them, just being a friendly companion as we walk along together. Because it can be a hard road. We're all go through periods of being a hard road. And just to have a bit of company on those difficult stretches, it can be all we need. And if you can just wait for the person to ask you for help, which is often you kind of think a person is crying, they're upset, and you kind of feel like, isn't that a question? Aren't they saying, I want this to stop? And often they're not. Often tears just have to come out. I'm not saying you encourage it or you're like, oh, have a good cry, or if you're not having a catharsis, you're not really having anything. I don't mean that at all. But if they're coming, just the fact that they're coming doesn't mean that you have to try and get them to stop. Because often when people moved to try and get people out of pain, it feels like it's selfless, but often it's not. Because often what is happening is the person, their pain is reflecting a pain in us, and we don't like it. I used to see this a lot working with babies, particularly babies who had birth trauma. And sometimes in the process of releasing that, the babies cry, and the crying, it almost goes into another dimension. It's the sort of crying that makes the hair stand up on the back of your head. And it's very, very difficult to listen to and to hold. And hold in the space for the baby that, like, if that's what you need to do, then I'm here and it's okay, and let it out kind of thing. But what's very interesting is how disturbing it is for the parents, because often the parents, like most of us, would have unresolved birth trauma. And as the baby's crying started to build, and it got into that zone of really resonating with a deeply suppressed cry inside the parents become very, very disturbed. And, you know, it was often all I could do to hold everybody in the room long enough that the baby could get it out. And the hilarious thing is, the baby would cry, and then once it was out, it would almost be like they would stop dead and just settle, and the great harmony would be in their system. And the parents and me were like wiping our foreheads like, oh my God, you know. And I used to really feel for the parents, because at least the baby doesn't have all that adult sophistication of covering and like, oh, you're not supposed to cry. It's like your baby. If you cry, it's fine, you know. But as adults, it has to be very controlled kind of environment to get back to that point to release birth trauma. And I've helped people in their 80s was the the oldest person that I worked with who released their birth trauma, which is so sad, because it means that they carried that their whole life. They carried this trauma until they were 80, and then they released it. It's beautiful that they release it, but kind of, it's a heavy burden to carry, you know. So this is a lovely thing to remember. You know, if you can't see the light, then I'll sit with you in the dark. Because often, and this is something you kind of have to look into for yourself, is like, am I trying to jolly the person out of where they're at? Because it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I don't like the way it makes me feel. I feel kind of that darkness they're feeling. It reminds me of the darkness that's inside me, and I don't like feeling that. So come on, let's just open the curtains and, you know, cheer up for God's sake, you know. It's not that bad, and of course it is that bad, and it's that bad until it's not. And that's the hard thing. The hard thing is to really, when you're sitting with the person in the dark, yeah, you're holding them, but really you're holding yourself. You're holding your own kind of darkness and your own, what it's bringing up and reflecting in you, that you're holding that, and you're not like allowing it to reverberate with the other person and get into this like dark resonance where you're both going deeper and deeper into the abyss, you know. You don't want to do that, but then you also don't want to try and squash it down and deny it, which is, you know, very easy to do, and we often do it without meaning to. So this is a lovely thing to remember, that like being willing to sit with somebody in the dark. That's what I was saying about, you know, working with people. A huge amount of healing goes on just from being willing to sit with them, just from being willing to hold the space with them, to not try and make it better. Not that you wouldn't want it to be better for them, of course you would, but to not try and, you know, interfere with their process because it's making you feel uncomfortable. To just hold it, you know. And yeah, it's amazing how powerful and how healing that can be, to just have a friendly bit of companionship as you're going through a very difficult stretch of the road. And if you can think of it like that, that you don't have to do much except be with them. You don't have to do much except just be that bit of, you know, friendly companionship, and think of it in terms of walking along beside them. You don't have to carry them. You don't have, you know, and it would be a little bit like that, you know, you're going through a difficult stretch, and then suddenly someone picks you up and starts carrying you. You know, it's like, I didn't want to be carried. I just wanted a bit of companionship. I didn't want to feel so on my own with it. So yeah, I encourage you to remember this one. It's a very good one, and to just sit with people rather than try and fix them, and just see what happens. It's beautiful.